The United States has reiterated its commitment to fostering economic growth and strengthening partnerships with Nigeria. Following a bilateral meeting with President Bola Tinubu, Secretary Blinken highlighted the eagerness of American entrepreneurs and companies to invest in Nigeria's economy, particularly in the tech sector. Acknowledging Nigeria's compelling opportunities for investors, Secretary Blinken addressed long-term challenges that must be overcome, including the repatriation of capital and the ongoing battle against corruption. He expressed support for Nigeria's economic reforms with the petrol subsidy removal, while recognizing their short-term impact on vulnerable communities. Blinken arrived in Nigeria as part of his four-nation African tour and will visit the commercial capital, Lagos, before heading to Angola.
At the UN General Assembly just this past September, President Tinubu said, and I quote, "Africa is nothing less than the key to the world's future." I'm here in Nigeria at President Biden's behest, and earlier this week we were in Cabo Verde, in Cote d'Ivoire, and we'll be going on to Angola, because we share that conviction. Africa has shaped our past, it is shaping the present, it will shape our future. The United States is committed to strengthening genuine partnerships on the continent to work to solve shared challenges and also to deliver on the promise and the fundamental aspirations of our peoples. Nigeria, as Africa's largest country, largest economy, largest democracy, is essential to that effort. And we are doing a lot of work together already to drive in a positive direction. We're driving climate action as partners in the Global Methane Coalition. We're pushing for permanent representation for African voices in the UN Security Council, in other international organizations that need to reflect the realities of today, not just the day that they were created many, many years ago. We're working and collaborating to support the development and use of artificial intelligence for good. With 30 other Atlantic countries, we're driving blue economic development, environmental protection, science and technology exchange through a new partnership for Atlantic cooperation.
During the course of that meeting, several issues were discussed of bilateral nature as well as multilateral nature. They range from food security to agriculture, to pharmaceuticals, to security itself in the region. And I have to say that the discussions were very fruitful, and a decision was also made that a number of these issues would be further discussed at the upcoming Nigeria-US Binational Commission. That is, if I'm correct, coming up between the 11th and the 13th of March. So that's around the corner. It is also important to note that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu brought up the issue of Nigeria's membership and participation in the G20, as well as the United Nations Security Council.
All right. U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Nigeria. Before your take on this.
Good. Thank you, Ayo. A real pop quiz for you this morning. You can hazard a guess. The first two-way satellite telephone communication between two leaders in the world was between who? Guess no further. Nigerian Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa and American President Kennedy, 23rd August 1963. That conversation heralded a lot of things about the relationship between America that spanned even before that time. And since then, Nigeria and America has been having conversations. But when you look at it over the years, the balance of power definitely has tilted more in favor of America, and the seeming little power we had in the region had plummeted over the years. And that's why when Americans come visiting like this, it is also a reminder that we need to do a lot more to get ourselves where we need to be. Anthony Blinken was here, like we said, in a couple of other African countries to be able to talk about partnership. What are these partnerships? Regional partnership for security. We know what is happening in Niger. There's a big alignment in Niger with the Russians, the Wagner Group and all of that. America wants Nigeria to help as regards security in this region. Nigeria is not going to do it alone, so they're putting some money as regards regional cooperation, about $45 million, into that pot. As the same was the case in Ivory Coast, when he went ahead to watch the game between Equatorial Guinea and the Ivorian team. Another thing they're talking about is business partnership. Most of the tech giants are having symbiotic relationship. Most of the top American tech giants are here. Microsoft, Google, and the likes, Oracle, and all of that. They were part of those that helped with government skilling up and training about 1 million people in tech skill development in the country. Also, there's a partnership for agriculture as regards the agricultural value chain. There's a lot more that can be done. Secretary of State Blinken was talking about the fact that some decisions that President Tinubu has made in the long term will be able to open the door for more investment in the sector. Also, he endorsed as bold decisions made by President Tinubu as regards removal of subsidy, flotation of the currency, and he says, okay, this over time will help. But Nigerians are reeling from the pain. As we speak today, dollar to the naira is well over 1,300. So I'm also very, very unclear about this accolades as regards these bold decisions that is hurting our own people. So I'm skeptical about what the West says about these decisions because we are on the receiving end of it. And in the past, they have not been good predictors as regards the medicine that works well for an economy like Nigeria. That has become a Gordian knot, and we don't know who's going to untie it. Also, it talked about, interpeople relationship, cultural exchanges, cultural partnerships, and things like that. It talks about, a forum for Nigeria and America to be able to dialogue more effectively, and a lot more work was done. They also had a Q&A yesterday with our Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Tuga, and Mr. Secretary of State Blinken. And the foreign affairs, the conversations were centered around what is America going to do for us in terms of security? Where do we align in terms of security? And there was a very critical question that was asked as regards the fact that, Nigeria is, against what is happening in Gaza. But the Americans are very ambivalent based on their historical tie with Israel and the great Jewish lobby. So where are we coalescing as regards point of views? But Foreign Minister Tuga was very smart in answering that question and says, one thing America and Nigeria has in common as regards the fight in Gaza is the fact that both countries, Nigeria and America, opt for a two-state solution, which we all know that the Israelis are saying is no longer on the table now because they are going out there and pounding Gaza. And they too, they had a very big fallout as regards the war recently with about 20 of their troops being killed in an attack in that region. And also many talks about, trade and interaction among both countries. But I think the most important thing is we cannot continue to be that country that sucks up to big nations and say, America, what do you have for us? I deliberately made reference to 63 because when Tafawa Balewa finally did visit America in the 60s, guess what happened? The accolades were a lot. They respected us a whole lot better then. But now we've lost a lot of that over the years. And just as a sidebar, as all of this is going on, the Indian foreign minister also talked about, the dichotomy between India and the global south and all of that. He gave a lecture at NIA recently. It shows that there's a lot of attention on Nigeria, but how can Nigeria harness that attention and build its own economy so that it can be a viable nation across the world? Here we have to go because of time.
Right.
Okay, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States, on a tour of 4 African states, Cape Verde, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Angola. And this is a follow-up on the African Leaders U.S. Summit that was held in the United States in Washington, D.C. in December 2022. So in diplomacy, you follow up, you follow through the kind of things we say to Nigerian leaders all the time. So this is why Anthony Blinken is here, basically. And of course, this is his 3rd trip to Africa. His 4th international trip this year. And of course, the issue is strategic. Nobody goes into diplomacy to do Father Christmas, as we tend to do in Nigeria. We do Santa Claus diplomacy in Nigeria, but we keep learning from other countries that you don't do Santa Claus diplomacy. Now, if you look at the countries that Anthony Blinken has visited, first, Cape Verde. on the Atlantic coast. The purpose in Cape Verde is to celebrate an achievement by the U.S., what they call the MCC Compact, which is an example of cooperation, maritime technology and all that, using Cape Verde. From Cape Verde, they went to Ivory Coast, where he had a meeting with President Alassane Ouattara. Now, Ivory Coast is bordered by many of these countries within the Sahel region that have issues with terror, with coups. And Ivory Coast is, of course, very strategic because Ivory Coast, being close to Niger. Niger is partnering now with Russia. Only about a week ago or so, they signed a strategic partnership with Russia. Now, in terms of geopolitics, America is concerned that Russia is gaining inroad into Africa, not just in Niger, but also in Mali. And of course, this conflict between U.S. and Russia. There's also the soccer match between U.S. and China, the U.S.-China soccer match, with China gaining inroads, acquiring big influence in not just West Africa, but across Africa. That, of course, is also of interest to the United States, as has been argued in a book titled The Coming Conflict with China. So we keep seeing patterns of that coming conflict with China, and of course, the United States is not going to fold its arms. In Angola, which Blinken is going to visit next after leaving Nigeria, Angola, the main interest is not just trade and partnership. It's also about the crisis in Central Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, with Angolan president being one of the major mediators in the crisis within the Central African region. The trip is scheduled for this, January 21 to 26. Nigeria was number 3 stop. Now, Nigeria, Anthony Blinken himself provided the justification for the visit. He said Nigeria's progress, Nigeria's democracy, Nigeria's market is very strategic and important to the survival of democracy in Africa. That's a no-brainer. Everybody says that all the time. The second point is that Nigeria is the United States' second major trading partner. In 2022 alone, trade both ways was over $10 billion, to be specific, $10.6 billion. And foreign direct investment from the United States to Nigeria was over $5 billion. So we have very important strategic trade partnership with the United States. Beyond that also, there are partnerships in the area of trade, security, cultural exchanges, and in fact, Anthony Blinken pointed out that, look, many Nigerians are in the United States relating with United States institutions in the cultural sector. And that, of course, is very clear to everyone. But part of the fallout was that he has made promise to add to the $300 million that has been spent on the West Coast to support security partnerships in the West Coast, to add an additional $45 million. And Nigeria has been a major beneficiary of that security partnership with the United States, given the challenge of Boko Haram and insurgency in Nigeria. And then he promised that the United States would do more in terms of security challenges, in terms of partnerships in health, in infrastructure, and in other areas. So I think from the point of view of the Americans, it was a very strategic visit to deepen relations, partnerships, collaboration with Nigeria. But the other side of it that I think we have to note also was a response by Yusuf Tuga, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And Yusuf Tuga, in the last few weeks, both at Davos and at that meeting with Blinken, has been using every opportunity to call for the democratization of the UN Security Council. He said it in Davos. He has said the same thing at this meeting with Blinken. Now, reform of the UN Security Council has been a major issue in terms of the destiny of the United Nations, created in October 1945, following the failure of the League of Nations, and then, the allies coming together and deciding that to have peace in the world, there must be the United Nations. And the Security Council is one of the 6 major organs of the United Nations. And that is the body that is empowered to arrive at resolutions, to impose sanctions, and to also, take decisions that will promote global peace. However, the major issue has been the fact that we have a Security Council of 15 members, 5 permanent members, the original victors of World War II, who took the decision, and since 1945, have tried to be dictating, what goes on in the rest of the world. And there have been challenges to this. The G4, the losers in World War II, Germany and Japan, supported by Brazil and one other country, came together and said, no, this dictatorship of the 5 cannot continue. And then you also have the group called Unity for Consensus, United for Consensus, led by Italy. And it has Mexico, it has some other countries there, who also said, look, we have to democratize the UN Security Council. And then you have the initiative in 2004, led by Kofi Annan, when he was UN Secretary General, talking about reform. But to date, the Big 5 continue to oppose the idea of the democratization of the United Nations Security Council. And I think that the intelligent point that Yusuf Tuga made, yesterday, is that you cannot have a United Nations that talks about rule of law, but does not at the same time respect basic principles of rule of law and democracy. And we have seen how, the dictatorship of the 5 in the UN Security Council affects decisions. They can't even take a decision on what is going on in Hamas, because the UN Security Council cannot speak with one mind. Beyond all of this, of course, Nigeria has, in terms of foreign policy, a non-aligned policy. And that is why Nigeria has not taken any side between either Israel or Hamas. What Nigeria continues to talk about, yes, the two-state solution, which Israel opposes, which in fact, yesterday, the War Cabinet of Israel met, including Netanyahu, Gallant, and Benny Gantz, and they took a decision that they will continue to fight Hamas, and that the aggression from the Israeli side will not end until Hamas is defeated. 24 soldiers on the Israeli side having been killed in Gaza on Monday. So that's where the world finds itself. What Nigeria continues to talk about is humanitarian aid without necessarily taking sides. But that's geopolitics. In terms of the strategic partnership, it now remains for Nigeria to look at benefits in terms of what Nigeria can bring on the table. And Anthony Blinken had specific demands. He said, yes, while trade with Nigeria is important, we need to worry about the repatriation of capital, for which reasons companies like Procter & Gamble and Emirates have decided to leave the Nigerian market. He also made a point about Nigeria providing a better operating environment for investors. And he talked about Nigeria addressing the challenge of corrosive corruption, high corruption and low-scale corruption. I hope that the Nigerian authorities, from President Buhari to President Tinubu to his team, will take special notice of those specific subtextual messages that Anthony Blinken dropped yesterday.
All right, very strong message there. His visit hasn't come to an end. Today, he's billed to stop here in Lagos, the commercial capital of Nigeria, and it's been in the news in recent times, and our next story would actually speak to some of the contentions around the role that Lagos State ought to play in this particular democracy. But in terms of the Secretary of State's visit to Nigeria, I must mention that as part of his visit, and hopefully we can touch it and just give you a little glimpse into his stop here in Lagos, it would be largely based on culture, exploring the cultural aspect or side of the Center of Excellence. And so looking forward to that. But beyond that, being the third stop, I believe there are also some comparisons that can be made and perhaps some lessons learned from his previous visits to Ivory Coast. I'll take a little quote from him with regards to especially their operations when it comes to tackling insecurity. He says, I have to applaud the approach that's been taken by Côte d'Ivoire, working with communities, listening to communities, making sure that the security forces understand the needs, the concerns of communities. He said this, praising their efforts, and actually recommended that the approach that Côte d'Ivoire has used in tackling insecurity ought to be a model for other African countries. And what is this approach? It's an approach that we have talked about a number of times when we talk about insecurity in Nigeria, a community-based approach, where insecurity or the fight against insecurity is seen as everyone's responsibility, where security agencies carry along communities and community leaders. The military in Nigeria often say that this is their approach, but when it comes to intelligence gathering, working with and partnering with communities to fight insecurity, I believe there's a lot of more work to be done there. And I think it's quite instructive that while he praised that in Cote d'Ivoire, he didn't quite say the same here in Nigeria. In fact, he identified it as one of the areas where the US was looking to partner with Nigeria to strengthen perhaps and train the military to be able to be, to have more capacity to fight insecurity. All in all, I mean, we've heard all the information and details from his visit. It's been successful so far. His last stop will be in Angola. And of course, as has been mentioned, the summary of it is that when it comes to, the US's foreign diplomacy, it's about deepening their inroads and ensuring that they do not lose at least their significance or powers on this continent. But very importantly, I think that the African continent can use this opportunity, being almost the bride that's been sought after, to strengthen its base. And so that's why it was quite important to bring on board the conversation around Nigeria's place at the UN Security Council. Perfect opportunity to do that, and perhaps a perfect time to put pressure so that we can have more involvement and perhaps more of a say on the U.S. Security Council. Move on to the next story. The chairman, Senate Committee on the Army, Senator Ali Ndume, yesterday warned President Bola Tinubu that there will be political consequences if he insists on moving some departments of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria headquarters to Lagos. Maintaining that the president was being misled by a cartel he termed Lagos Boys, Ndume argued that the so-called members of the cartel do not know how Nigeria works and will not be able to help the president when the repercussions come. The CBN, in an internal memo, had recently said it was moving some offices of the Apex Bank to Lagos due to congestion of some departments. Also, the government announced that it was relocating the headquarters of FAN to ensure seamless operations and save costs. But Ndume argued that if the offices were being moved due to congestion, the best place would be Nasarawa, Kaduna, or Kogi, and other states surrounding Abuja for the sake of proximity, instead of faraway Lagos. He emphasized that it was not the votes from Lagos that brought Tinubu to office, advising him to jettison any plans to implement the relocation decision. Ndume said there's a consensus in the north against the move by the president because there's only one federal capital, which is Abuja. Rufai.
So, I mean, this is another clear case of the politicization of government operation in Nigeria. And I think it's very instructive, what Elder Statesman Alhaji Femi Okunu did say yesterday about being Nigerian first before anything. Because if the CBN says we want to move for operational efficiency, there is no big deal about it. So will Ali Ndume rather that government start wasting revenue it doesn't have to build new offices in Nasarawa and other parts because it must be in the north, rather than moving to Lagos where you have already offices that you can easily expand? Aren't civil servants thought that they can be moved to other areas for specific purposes? Can't they be moved to farms? So with Mr. Ali Ndume's analogy, why can't Mr. Ali Ndume say that they should remove NIMASA headquarters from Apapa here to Abuja because it must be in the capital in the north? NIMASA is here because it operates well, and that's why it's there in Apapa. So let us stop this over-politicization of things. And the reference to Lagos Boys and you should remember it's not Lagos that got us the vote. No. The man has been voted in. You should stop saying that there are going to be political consequences and trying to make threats. At first, we should be Nigerians first.
Nigerians first.
Okay, the point that Alhaji Femi Okunu, SAN, the non-Nigerian, who was on this program yesterday, was making, was that, look, every government, more or less, my own understanding of his point, will take decisions in terms of how it manages affairs on the basis of efficiency and productivity. and that if it occurs to the Tinubu administration that it needs to decongest certain offices and relocate them elsewhere, the focus will be efficiency and productivity, adding more value. That should be the major umbrella. But like all things Nigeria, this has now been reduced to the level of ethnicity and emotions. And that's precisely what Senator Ali Ndume has done. And it's not alone. There are other persons who have also said, oh, maybe certain things should also be moved around. Maybe the Ministry of Trade and Investment should go to nature if we're talking about, locals in terms of, nomenclature. But Senator Ali Ndume, personally, I know him. He seems to have a reputation for blowing hot air. I used to, once or twice, when I was spokesperson, I appeared with him on Al Jazeera. And at that time, he was blowing hot air about Boko Haram and insurgency in the Northeast, and how President Jonathan was guilty of this and that. But blowing hot air is not what we need. He says, for example, that no country has two capitals. That is not true. 13 countries of the world have more than one capital.
Yes, sir.
South Africa, in fact, has 3. It has a judicial capital in Bloemfontein. It has a legislative capital in Cape Town. It has the administrative capital in Pretoria. Côte d'Ivoire, where they are playing football now, has 2 capitals, Abidjan and Yamoussoukro, and so on and so forth. Other countries, Bolivia, Malaysia, Brazil, Germany, they have 2 capitals. So for administrative convenience to be able to add value. So reducing everything to the level of ethnicity is very wrong. Now, I think Senator Ndume is also appealing to base primordial ethnic sentiments by saying, we will fight it, we will not allow it. Okay, what are they going to do now? President Tinubu is there. He has the authority to take decisions. When another person becomes president tomorrow, he can change it. To the extent that if the original purpose is to ensure productivity and efficiency, we can defend that principle. To reduce it to the level of primordial sentiments and emotionalism, and Senator Ndume, who is the chief whip of the Senate, fueling ethnic primordial antediluvian sentiments, I think is beneath the position that he occupies. I think we should focus on how government can be more efficient and deliver.
Absolutely.
That should be our focus.
Absolutely. Now, just very quickly, he had mentioned, Dr. Batiweni had said in terms of consequences, that there will be political consequences. In fact, he emphasized that point by reminding the president that it wasn't Lagos votes that got him in as president. So again, almost threatening the fact that this action could potentially cost the president his political goodwill in the North. And like has been mentioned, if his arguments were based on perhaps more, efficient reasons or reasons that had to do with the issue of governance, it would carry weight. But unfortunately, it seems that it boils down to this North versus South, and this is quite a dangerous path to follow, especially in light of the fragility of tensions between both sides of the nation. At this moment, what he ought to be doing as a statesman is building, not trying to poke holes and inciting more divisions along those lines. But I mean, I don't know if the president would respond to this, or he would still go on and carry out the actions in terms of moving some offices of the CBN to Lagos and FAN headquarters to Lagos.